What's going on, everybody? It's your friendly neighborhood web developer back in business today, and today we're going to make CSS great again with an introduction to Sass. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and spin that web. So the three things I want to show you about Sass today are variables, Sass Maps, and mixins. Now this is by no means an all-inclusive tutorial on Sass, but it should give you enough to get you started on your way. So let's go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code and take a look at what we can do with these things. We'll open up our command prompt. And we're going to make a directory called SassyMe. And then we're going to cd into SassyMe. And then we're going to code. And this should open up Visual Studio Code automatically in that directory. Drag this up here for you. Perfect. Alright, so now that we're in here, first thing we're going to need is an index.html. And we're going to put in some boilerplate for that. And now that we have the boilerplate, we have to make sure that we reference our CSS file. So we'll do link, tab, and then we'll make a folder called CSS and do a main.css. Alright, that's all good to go. Now we need to make our folder, CSS, and give it a file, main.sass. So Visual Studio Code has Sass built into it for a language. The only thing that you'll need to make it work is a compiler. So Sass is a CSS preprocessor. So in order to make it work on a web page, you need to use a precompiler. So if you type in live Sass compiler in Google, you'll get this result page. I'll put the link in the description. So if you go ahead and click install, it should open up Visual Studio Code for you. Might take a second. Alright, and I already have it downloaded into my Visual Studio Code, so mine says uninstall, but yours would have an install button here if you don't already have it. So once you have that, you should have this button in the lower portion of your screen here. It says Watch Sass, and if you click on that, it'll automatically start watching for Sass files, and then it will compile them into regular CSS files. It'll also look for errors in your code and throw them right here in the console if you try to compile it and it comes up with an error, which is pretty nice. Alright, so we're just going to close that down. And let's go ahead and start building some of this code. Just some regular stuff, body and HTML. We'll need 100% height. Whoop, if I can type right, there we go. And then we'll also need 100% width. If we go into the body itself, we're going to want to do a margin of 0. And that should give us some really basic stuff there. One of the things that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, though, is that with Sass you can do variables. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. If I put a variable in called orange, let's say, if I got sick of writing out the same hex code 3,000 times in a project, I could simply put it in as a variable once, and then I would be able to call it anywhere in my Sass file. So if I wanted to put the background color of the body to that, I could just go like this and type in my variable name. Okay, so now if I go here and save my index file, I'll right click and then open with a live server. And as soon as that pops up, now you see that my background is the orange color. So I'm just going to minimize that and go here. Alright, so now when I go ahead and make changes, we should see live updates over here. I'm actually going to turn this into a mobile setup. Hit Control-Shift-I in your Explorer, and then if you click on this icon here, you can toggle the device toolbar, and then here is where you can choose your devices. So I'm going to just look at iPhone X. Going back to this variable, if I wanted to, this way, if I decide to change up a color scheme, all I have to do is change the variable once and I'm good to go. For instance, if I went to a red, 4 zeros, there we go, and hit save, you'll see it automatically updates over here on the browser. But in most cases, we're working with more than one color, and that's where Sass Maps can come in. Say you have an entire palette. Let's say you go to Coolors, you click on the generator, you get this really cool palette that you like. You can go ahead and export it as a Sass, and it'll automatically download the file. And then if you click it here, I have it set up to automatically open in Visual Studio Code. So we should see that pop up over here. There we go. And you can see it automatically exports HSL and RGB values. I'm just going to grab these here and copy them, and I'm going to paste them into my Sass file. But first I'm going to go ahead and open up the Sass map by doing a variable-ish kind of thing like we did before. Put my $sign. I'm going to call this colors because it's my color palette, and then I'm going to use parentheses instead of curly braces, and then I'm going to paste all those values in there. Now inside of a Sass map, it kind of works like in an array. So instead of semicolons, we're going to have commas, and we don't need to have these $signs that we have here. So we'll get rid of those. And then we just need a single semicolon at the end to make sure that that's right. And then the body background color, obviously we don't have the orange variable anymore, so we're going to change that. And then in order to go ahead and get the color from the colors Sass map, we need to type map get, put in the name of your Sass map, which in this instance is colors, and then the color we want, let's go with color 3. And we'll put a semicolon at the end of that. We'll save that, and you'll see when I click back over to our document, we now have this kind of teal minty color as our background color. So let's go ahead and move on to the next bit. Let's just go ahead and get some of the HTML that we're going to need here. Let's go ahead and create a div with an ID of background, and that'll work as our background, as you might imagine. And then we're just going to put in a single H1 tag, and let's put make CSS great again. We'll save that, and you'll see we've got some nice unstylized stuff going on in our browser. So we're going to go back to our Sass file, and now we're going to start building out some of the components in the CSS. Now the beautiful thing about Sass, other than variables, mixins, and Sass maps, is that you can do nesting. So instead of having to figure out what tags I have to put after body to get to that H1, I can simply go here inside of my body brackets and type in H1, and then I can start styling. So for this particular heading, we're going to go font size 40 pixels. We'll go with background color, and we're going to use that map again. So we're going to go map get colors color 5, and then we're also going to put some padding on it and a border radius to give it kind of a pill looking shape, and that's going to be at about 50 pixels. We'll align the text to center, and then we'll give it a width. 70% should do it. Okay, great. But now, well, it's still pretty ugly, but we're making progress. Inside this body, we're also going to add some stuff for the background div. So again, we can nest it. We'll just go background, and then for that, we're going to put a background color, and we're going to use our map again. We're going to do colors, and then for this, we're going to go with color 2. We'll close that out, and then we're also going to put a position of absolute so that we can give it a Z index to make it go behind everything else, like that. Z index will go -1, so that'll give us an absolute background. We'll also want to do width 100%, height 100%. And then just to give it a little bit of flair here, we're going to use a clip path. If we go over to our web browser and go visit our friend Clippy, you'll see we can do these really cool shapes. Now, what I like to do is set my demo size to something roughly the size of a phone, if that's what I'm designing for. In this case, I'm going to choose a parallelogram. I don't need to include the WebKit prefixes that you would see down here because the Sass compiler automatically does that. So I'm just going to go ahead with this. We're going to highlight it, Control C to copy. We're going to go back into our code editor, Control V to paste. Now, if I pull up my document here, I'll save my Sass file and you should see it automatically update. There we go. But alas, it's still ugly. So the reason for that is that we don't have everything set up properly. So the next thing I want to look at with you is what's called mixins. Have you ever found that you're just repeating the same kind of CSS sequence? Like for me in particular, I use flex box a lot. So I'll end up doing display flex, justify content, align items, all things of that nature. So to make the coding easier, we're going to go ahead and use a mixin. To do that, you simply type @mixin, and then you give it a name. In this instance, I'm going to go with flex, and then we use our parentheses and some curly braces to open it up. And then, excuse me, you can type in repeatable blocks of code. So I'll go display flex, justify content, if I can spell, and I'll go with center. Going to go with align items center as well, so that it centers on the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. And then I'm just going to turn on a flex wrap because that's typically something I end up doing anyway down the road with flex. I'm also going to make a mixin for my headings. I like to use a certain font and a bunch of other different parameters with a lot of my headings, so I'm going to go ahead and keep it consistent here. Mixin headings, there we go. Okay, so for the headings font family, I'm going to go with Oswald. It probably works better if you use parentheses. Oswald, there we go. And then we're going to go with a text transform of uppercase. We're also going to do font style of italic. And then for headings, I'm going to use another color from our palette there. Do map get colors, and this time I'm going to go with color 1. Okay, so now in order to use that, we need to actually reference them in these portions here where we would normally apply them. So to include it, let's include the flex on the body itself. So to do that, simply just put @include flex, and you're done. And we're going to do the same thing with the heading here. We'll go @include headings, and we're done. We'll save it, and now we're getting somewhere. Why is this so big? You probably noticed it as I was typing. Put an S on that. Let's take that off. There we go. Now we've got more of a pill-shaped, almost like a button there. So how do we make that even better? Well, I'd say let's do some stuff when we hover on the H1. So we can do some cool things with Sass in this too. Simply type the ampersand and a colon hover, and now we can add some hover values to this H1. For me personally, I like to add a little bit of timing on the transition to make it look smoother. So we'll go up 0.25 seconds. We'll add a cursor of pointer so that it gives us the little hand. And then I actually want to make it a little bit darker color when I hover. So the best way to do that is to look at the color that you have. And then in Visual Studio Code, you'll notice when you hover, you get this sweet color palette. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate this line. I'm holding Shift Alt and hit the down arrow. Now I'm going to label this color 6. Make sure I have my comma at the end of that so I can add another value. And if I hover it over here, I can click on this and I can actually make it a bit darker. So we'll go with that color, looks all right. And then we just need to add an alpha value for the opacity and an A there. Okay, so now I just need to add this color 6 down on my hover transition. We'll go with background color, map get colors, color 6, get our semicolon. And now when we hover over here, can't see it unless I turn this off. So let's go like that. You'll see we get a slightly darker color from our original. And that was really easy because all we had to do was hover over this value and we get a color picker. Pretty cool stuff. But let's take a look and see what the Sass does in terms of converting it to a document. We'll go ahead and enlarge this. And if you look, when we started the Sass file, it automatically made this .map file. We don't need to worry about that. But the really cool thing it does is it compiles it into a regular CSS file, which we then reference in our HTML. So if we look, all the variables and mixins that we made actually get written out in standard CSS. All the nesting that we did automatically gets done for us by the compiler, which is some secret sauce that I wish I had known a lot sooner. And that's going to do it for today. If you learned something, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And as always, don't forget to subscribe for more tips and tutorials coming out in the future. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.